Hi, and welcome back to Bible Walkthrough. I'm Adam Ayers.
This is Wes Warner.
And on this episode, we find Jesus as the hater. Did Jesus say you have to hate people? Apparently. If you look at Luke's Gospel, Jesus says to hate some very important people in your life. We'll get to that in just a moment on Bible Walkthrough. So in this text that we're looking at today, Luke 14, Jesus makes some incredible demands on his disciples. The gospel says, "Now large crowds were traveling with him," that's Jesus, "and he turned and said to them, 'Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple.'" So the question here is, does Jesus tell us to hate people? Because we hear that Jesus is the Lord of love, which he is. And to hear Jesus command that whoever follows him must hate these critical people in his life: father, mother, sisters, brothers, wife, and yes, even his own soul or his own self, is a little bit problematic. What do you see in that, Wes?
I agree, it's problematic. I think this is something that the devil uses to confuse people. Like, when I was a young man, I read that, and I'm thinking, all right, that's why I shouldn't ever listen to my mom and dad anymore, and I don't need to do what they say, because I'm supposed to hate them, because that's what God wants me to do. It just messed with my head. But I don't think that's what Jesus is saying. If you look in Mark 7, you see Jesus criticizing the Pharisees for doing that. The Pharisees were saying, we're not going to help our mom and dad, and we're going to take our money and give it to ourselves instead. It's devoting it to God, that's what they say, but really they're keeping it for themselves and holding on to it. So I see Jesus criticizing the Pharisees for turning their back on their mother and father and saying, you're not helping them? Well, you're totally against God. So to say that here Jesus really does want you to hate your mom and dad and never care for them again wouldn't make sense to read that into this. So for me, I just take it as a strong indicator of where God wants our loyalty to be. Just like he had Abraham climb up and sacrifice his son Isaac to test where his loyalty was, God wants our loyalty towards him in such a strong place that if he were to ask us to sacrifice our own child, we would do it without hesitation. Total loyalty to God. That doesn't mean to stop taking care of our children, to stop loving them, but to really love them, we have to put him first in our hearts. What do you think?
I agree in substance with what you're saying here, that yes, the thrust of the passage is about who gets your highest loyalty. That is the section of Luke's gospel. That's what's going on here. In that time, obviously, family is a very high value. You think of the person who says, "Let me follow you, Jesus, but first I must bury my father." Now, of course, Matthew softens this quote. Matthew's version of this quote is, "Whoever loves mother or father more than me is not worthy to be my disciple." And that has something to do with Matthew's agenda. But Luke is very strong on this. And probably this is closer to the original speech that Jesus gave, saying hate. And that's a very problematic term. And literally, it's to divest of all involvement. To say, it's the word Mesa, where we get the terms like misogyny, misanthropy, those terms from, to hate. But it says he has to hate even his own life. And Jesus goes on to say he has to count the cost. So that's really the qualifier that reflects back on what do you mean by hate, is you have to count the cost. You have to give up everything. You have to give up your goods, it says in verse 33. Everything that is of yourself, it says in verse 33. The follower to Jesus must give up everything up to themselves. And normally, even today, we hear people say things like, well, my family is my first ministry, or I've got to take care of my family first. And Jesus' comeback to that would be, do you? Do you? Is there anything that has a higher or equal loyalty? If so, it doesn't work. We have to have Jesus first. And that's why these quotes about bringing a sword in Matthew, dividing between the family in Matthew. And that's problematic for us who frequently want to come to Jesus in order to make our families stay together. I want my kids and my wife and all my families to be together, so we're going to go to church or something like that. And Jesus says, no, these loyalties given to me are problematic, and sometimes I will call upon you to have that highest loyalty to me at the cost of other things. Thus, the cost to build a tower, the cost to go to war. What are you going to count as your cost to follow Jesus? And that's the simple and obvious meaning of the passage. As you say, father, mother, sister, brother, children, even your own life. Hate them. Take no value in them. That's really tough. And you're right, he calls us later on to honor father and mother. But in this, the honoring is not equal to the love for Christ and the loyalty there. You have to discount them. So I don't think that this means to, like you said, to be abused as a teenager, to say, this is my right to go dishonor my parents or my siblings or whatever, because it says hate your own self too. That doesn't mean commit suicide.
Right.
It just means you have to discount your interests. And apparently, discounting your father and mother for anything other than Christ is prohibited. Because going against your parents just as, well, I don't have to obey them, is self-interest, and Jesus says, hate your own self too. So this is anything less than Christ. No value. Hard challenge, eh?
Yeah.
I wish there was some way to make it lighter, because this challenges me, but I don't see that there is one.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because even Jesus was a man who stayed in his father's profession and served in his father's house for 30 of his 33 years here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And he led an example of taking care of his family. He took care of his family until that point where he said, now it's time for me to do my father's business. And then he left his house and left his carpentry position to do the work of the kingdom in a different way. So
even at 12 years old, he's abandoning his parents to go do the work of his father.
And then he went back to their house and was subject to them.
Yes.
So it's interesting to see there's both happening there.
Mm-hmm.
He's building up family and he's leaving to do the Father's will.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Better and best, some and most. And Jesus claims the high card.
And at all times he's doing his Father's will.
Yes.
And whatever that costs.
Mm-hmm. Sobering words from Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not the sense of hate that we have, as in the sense of embittered anger or the malevolence, but certainly hate as in, oh, I hate that food, or I'm set to discount that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So not a sinful kind of hate, but a very clear removal of worth. Well, I hope that challenges you, challenges me, and we will see you next challenge, next text, and next time on Bible Walkthrough.